They confirmed that licensed clubs, pubs, cinemas, casinos, nightclubs and places of worship have been ordered to close from midday tomorrow. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, announced the drastic measures after a meeting of state and territory leaders this evening. Restaurants and cafes will be restricted to takeaway service only. On schools, Mr Morrison says the health advice has not changed and students should still go to school tomorrow. However, he says parents are free to keep their children at home should they wish. Well, for more, political reporter Andrew Green joins us live from Canberra. Andrew, it's a pretty exhaustive list of places that will shut from midday tomorrow. Just run us through it.
That's right. From midday, Karina, we're seeing a number of places that the Prime Minister describes as principal places of social gathering. They'll be closing their doors so that large groups of people won't be congregating and therefore spreading the disease or increasing the rate of that spread. What is significant, though, in this list is that it seems to be a bit of a back down from what a number of states were pushing for. They were today, New South Wales, Victoria and the ACT, pushing for the closure of virtually everything but essential services. That is no longer happening as a result of tonight's National Cabinet meeting. So instead, from midday, we'll see the closure of clubs, pubs, the licensed areas of those large clubs, not the accommodation areas, casinos, nightclubs, restaurants and cafes. Except with restaurants and cafes, they'll be permitted to still provide takeaway service, but there won't be any dining in. Now, on the important question of schools, this is one that has caused great confusion throughout the day. Again, we saw the governments of New South Wales, Victoria and the ACT indicate very strongly that they were looking to shut those this week, or in the case of Victoria, go to holidays early. The Prime Minister says that won't be happening. He says parents are, of course, free to keep their children home, but it is his view, and the view, he says, of the expert medical panel that is advising National Cabinet, that schools should remain open to their students if parents would like them to go. So some fairly significant announcements there tonight. A back down, I would suggest, of sorts on a range of measures that we were expecting several key states to start implementing this working week.
And all of that brought on by people simply not following social distancing rules.
That's right. This is a message the Prime Minister has been getting tougher on throughout the day. It's been a long day. We've got to point out, in his first media press conference this morning, he had very strong words for the crowds that had been seen throughout the weekend gathering at beaches such as Bondi in Sydney. He said this was unacceptable. This was going to be costing lives, putting pressure on the health system with the spread of the virus that could result from those large gatherings at public places. And it was a message he repeated tonight that is brewing with these numbers that we see climbing every day in the order of 25% increases in rates of infection. Well, Scott Morrison said, if the health system is to cope, it depends on Australians doing the right thing. So that was a very clear warning again from the Prime Minister. Whether it's being listened to by large sections of the community, we'll have to wait to see over the coming days and weeks.
And the Chief Medical Officer, Brendan Murphy, he had a rather pointed message for young people in particular. He says some people just haven't got it in terms of social distancing, and that he's mainly talking to young people in that regard. And he said that you don't want to be responsible for the death of an older person.
That's right. There is quite a large view in the community that this is a virus that doesn't hurt younger people as much as the elderly members of the community, and that's the message that Brendan Murphy was trying to get on top of there, is warning young people that their actions do have deadly consequences. Now, a lot of the closures that we'll see tomorrow are aimed at younger sections of the community. So the closure of nightclubs and pubs is aimed at trying to stop those large gatherings. But of course, there will continue to be other pressure put on people in the community to keep social distancing, keeping those distances between each other when they're in public, even when they're going to a supermarket, which is still, of course, allowed to be open. Now, another thing that wasn't discussed in tonight's meeting that has to be pointed out is the proposal to start locking down individual suburbs. This was, to my understanding, very much a live option going into the meeting. People were pushing for this to be adopted in Australia the same way it's been adopted in parts of Europe and China, where police patrols are monitoring residents in particularly affected suburbs and districts. This is something that is not currently being considered, but there is certainly a push within some of the leaders and some of the figures involved in the National Cabinet that this may have to be again looked at in coming weeks.
And Andrew, the Prime Minister pointed out that this is just stage one, that stage two has not been discussed, but there is room for more drastic measures on the way. Could they come as soon as Tuesday when National Cabinet meets next?
Well, he did describe these measures as being in place for 6 months and to be reviewed monthly. But of course, as we saw today, the process can change very quickly. The meeting was going to always be on Tuesday, but it was brought forward largely at the request of states to this evening. Now, by Tuesday, if we're continuing to see large gatherings or we're seeing those cases spiralling upwards again, you could bet that these stage two or stage three could again be discussed. At this stage, I think the members of the National Cabinet are going to wait a little bit longer to see how these rules play out. It's going to be a steep learning curve for many members of the public tomorrow when they start to see their favourite establishments shut their doors at midday. But I suspect on Tuesday we'll get an initial assessment of how that move is going, and then in the days following whether more needs to be done.
Okay, Andrew Green reporting there from Canberra.